Look at your arms for a second. Not your shirt, not your watch. Your actual arms? Now compare them to a dog, or a chimpanzee, or even a rabbit. Something immediately feels strange, because compared to almost every mammal on Earth, you are practically naked. Dogs have fur, cats have fur, bears have fur, chimpanzees have fur, even tiny mice have fur. Yet somehow, humans ended up with almost none. Which raises a surprisingly big question. Why did humans lose their fur? Because if fur is so useful, why would evolution ever get rid of it? At first, losing fur sounds like a terrible idea. Fur keeps animals warm, protects skin, blocks sunlight, and helps survive cold nights. In fact, if you were designing a mammal from scratch, fur would probably be one of the first features you'd add, not remove. But millions of years ago, our ancestors faced a problem so serious that evolution began removing one hair at a time. And the culprit was hiding in plain sight. The sun. Not a predator, not a disease, not another human. The sun. To understand why humans lost their fur, we need to travel back about 6 million years, back to a world that looked very different. Back then, our ancestors spent much of their lives in forests, and unlike modern humans, they were covered in thick body hair. And honestly, fur was fantastic. It solved problems before they even happened. It was nature's all-in-one survival package. Need protection from scratches? Fur helps. Need protection from cold mornings? Fur helps. Need protection from insects? Fur helps. For millions of years, fur was basically nature's Swiss Army knife. So if fur was working so well, why did evolution suddenly decide to change anything? Well, it didn't. Evolution never plans ahead. It simply reacts when the environment changes. And eventually, the environment began changing, very slowly. So slowly that no single generation noticed it happening. The forests started shrinking. The climate became drier. Open grasslands began spreading across parts of Africa. The world was changing, and our ancestors had a choice. Stay in the shrinking forests, or venture into the open landscape. A landscape with fewer trees, less shade, and much more sunlight. Some of our ancestors began spending more and more time on the ground, walking, exploring, searching for food, and that's when the real problem appeared. Imagine wearing a giant fur coat while walking under the Australian summer sun, not for 10 minutes, not for an hour, but all day, every day. That's essentially the situation our ancestors were beginning to face. The fur that once protected them was slowly becoming a disadvantage. And the more time they spent moving across open landscapes, the worse the problem became, because movement creates heat. And soon, our ancestors would accidentally discover something that changed human evolution forever. Not sharper teeth, not bigger muscles, not better claws, a cooling system. Here's a strange fact. Humans are not particularly fast. A horse is faster. A cheetah is faster. Even your neighbor's dog is probably faster. But humans are good at something else. Something weird and incredibly powerful. Humans are endurance machines. We might lose the sprint, but over long distances, the story changes completely. Imagine you're chasing an antelope, not for 30 seconds, not for 5 minutes, for hours. That sounds ridiculous, but that's exactly what early humans may have done. This strategy is called persistence hunting, and honestly, it's one of the strangest hunting methods ever invented. The animal runs away. Humans follow. The animal stops to rest. Humans keep coming. Again, and again, and again. Eventually, the prey becomes exhausted. Not because humans are faster, because humans refuse to stop. And that raises a fascinating question. How could humans keep moving for so long under a brutal African sun? The answer wasn't bigger muscles, or bigger brains. At least not yet. The answer was cooling. Every moving body produces heat, including yours. Right now, even sitting in a chair, your body is producing heat. The harder you move, the hotter you become, and eventually, too much heat becomes dangerous. Most animals solve this problem in different ways. Dogs pant. Lizards hide. Hippos spend hours in water. Everyone has a strategy. Humans developed something extraordinary. A superpower so common that most people never think about it. Sweat. Not exactly the most glamorous superpower, but incredibly effective. When sweat evaporates from your skin, it carries heat away. like a natural air conditioner built directly into your body. There's just one problem. Sweat works best on exposed skin, not under a thick furry blanket. Imagine trying to cool yourself down while wrapped in a giant wool blanket. In the middle of summer, while running, that's when evolution began rewarding individuals with slightly less body hair, not all at once, very gradually. Over countless generations, one hair less, then another, until eventually, our ancestors looked very different. But evolution didn't remove every hair. Some hair stayed. And there was a very good reason for that. Because the next mystery isn't why humans lost their fur. It's why we kept some of it, especially on our heads. And that answer is even stranger. But evolution wasn't trying to make humans completely hairless. If that were true, we wouldn't have any hair left at all. Instead, it kept hair in some very specific places. Let's start with the easiest one. Your head, out of your entire body. It's the part that spends the most time facing the sun. And underneath that hair is the most complicated object evolution has ever produced. Your brain. Brains don't like overheating. Even a small increase in temperature can reduce performance, which is bad news. If you're trying to survive, hair works like a surprisingly effective sunshade. Not perfect, but enough to reduce direct heat from sunlight. Sometimes, a few strands make a huge difference. But if hair on our heads helps protect our brains, why don't we have thick hair covering our faces too? Or our shoulders? Or our backs? Clearly, evolution wasn't simply trying to cover everything. It was choosing very carefully. Take your eyebrows. For example, they're tiny. Most people barely notice them. But without them, you'd quickly realize how important they really are. Eyebrows don't exist to make you look serious or surprised. Their main job is surprisingly practical. They help keep sweat out of your eyes. Imagine running for hours across a hot African savannah. Without eyebrows, every drop of sweat would run straight into your eyes. That would make hunting much harder. Then there are your eyelashes. They're so small, you almost never think about them until something flies straight into your eye. The more scientists studied human hair, the stranger the story became. Because we didn't simply lose hair, we rearranged it. Almost like evolution was redesigning the entire body. And that's where another fascinating theory appears. Maybe humans didn't lose fur because of heat alone. Maybe tiny creatures played a much bigger role. Fleas, ticks, lice, tiny animals, tiny problems, until they start spreading disease. Imagine trying to find a single flea inside a thick coat of fur. It's a little like searching for one grain of sand on a beach. Now imagine doing the same thing on mostly bare skin. The flea has nowhere to hide. Suddenly, the odds change completely. Some researchers believe this made parasites much easier to detect and easier to remove. That could have reduced disease and improved survival. But here's where the story becomes even more interesting. Scientists still don't agree on the exact answer. Not because the evidence is weak, but because evolution rarely has just one cause. Sometimes, it's several small advantages working together. Think of evolution like building a bridge. No single bolt holds the entire structure together. Remove one, and the bridge still stands, but add hundreds of small improvements, and suddenly the entire structure becomes stronger. The same thing may have happened to human hair. Running, sweating, parasites, sunlight. Each one may have pushed evolution just a little, and then something extraordinary happened. Humans stopped adapting only with their bodies and started adapting with their ideas. That single change may have transformed our entire future. Losing fur created an entirely new problem, cold. For millions of years, thick fur had acted like a built-in winter coat. Now, that protection was disappearing. Our ancestors had traded one problem for another. Most animals solve this problem in the obvious way. Grow thicker fur, grow more feathers, grow more insulation. Humans did something no other animal had ever done. Instead of growing a better coat, humans invented one. Clothing. It sounds obvious today, but at the time, it changed everything. Evolution normally changes bodies. Humans started changing the world instead. That tiny shift may be one of the biggest turning points in our entire history. Fire kept us warm. Shelters protected us from the weather. Clothing replaced fur. Little by little, our intelligence began doing the job that evolution once did. At this point, you might be wondering something. If losing fur was such a brilliant evolutionary move, why didn't every other mammal do the same? It's a fair question. And the answer reveals something fascinating about evolution. Because evolution doesn't build the best body. It builds the body that's good enough for a particular environment, different environments, different solutions. A polar bear doesn't need to run for hours beneath an African sun. It needs to survive freezing temperatures for a polar bear. Fur isn't a problem. It's the solution. Evolution isn't asking, what's the smartest design? It's asking, will this survive long enough to have children? That's it. That's the entire game. For humans, less body hair happened to fit the challenges we faced. For wolves, thick fur still works. For whales, blubber became a better answer. Every species wrote a different survival story. So, did humans lose their fur because of heat? Yes, partly. Because of sweat. Probably parasites. Possibly. The truth is, it was almost certainly all of them together. Evolution almost never works with perfect solutions. It works with good enough to survive, good enough to reproduce, good enough to keep going. That's why humans don't have the best bodies. We have bodies that were simply good enough for the challenges our ancestors faced. And perhaps that's the real lesson hidden inside this story. Humans didn't become extraordinary because we were stronger than nature. We became extraordinary because we learned to work with it. And here's one final thought. Right now, humans aren't just adapting to the world anymore. We're changing the world faster than evolution ever could. The next chapter of human evolution may not be written by nature alone. It may also be written by us. It's easy to think evolution is something that happened long ago, something locked away in museums, or buried beneath ancient rocks. But evolution has never stopped. It simply moves more slowly than a human lifetime. Every child born today inherits a story written by millions of generations before them. Every heartbeat, every breath, every drop of sweat is part of that story. Even something as ordinary as sweating isn't ordinary at all. It's the result of countless tiny evolutionary victories stacked together over millions of years. So, the next time you complain about being sweaty on a hot summer day, remember this. That sweat may have helped make us human. And perhaps the strangest part of all is that one of the biggest steps in human history wasn't something we gained. It was something we lost, our fur. When we think about evolution, we usually imagine dinosaurs, ancient fossils, or giant prehistoric creatures. But sometimes, the biggest evolutionary story is much closer. It's staring back at us every morning, in the bathroom mirror. Every scar, every fingerprint, every drop of sweat, every strand of hair is a tiny reminder that you're carrying millions of years of history without even noticing. And perhaps that's what makes being human so extraordinary. Not because we stopped evolving, but because we learned to shape our own evolution. One idea, one invention, and one generation at a time. If this story changed the way you see yourself, there are many more hidden stories waiting to be uncovered. So if you're curious about the strange, surprising, and fascinating journey of humanity, you're always welcome here. Until next time, stay curious, because every ordinary thing about being human has an extraordinary story behind it.